Brian, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Before we get into discussing the bank, which is what we're here for, tell us about Brian Humphreys. Are you a local guy? Tell us about your upbringing, your school, etc.
Sure, absolutely. I'm from here. I grew up in Weslaco, and so grew up down here. Moved away to Austin, went to school at UT, and lived in Austin for about 6 years. Not all for school, and then I lived up in the Dallas area for a few years before I moved back. And I decided I wanted to get into banking, and I got a job with Texas State Bank in Weslaco, and so that's what brought me back to the Valley initially.
What did you study in college?
My undergraduate degree was in international business. I thought I wanted to spend a fair amount of time in Mexico, and so I spent some time studying down there as well. And then when I was in Dallas, I got my MBA at UT Arlington while I was working up there. So.
And at what point in your life did you say banking's for me?
Well, part of it was I lived in Dallas, and I knew Dallas wasn't the place for me. Growing up in a place like this, you get into Dallas and it's just too many people, and you don't feel like you can make a difference in the areas you live. And moving back here, you truly have the opportunity to make a difference in your community and in meaningful ways. And so I saw that opportunity ahead, and so that's why I chose to move back home.
And so how long have you been with Rio Bank?
I've been here.
What's your title today?
Sure. I've been with Rio just about 17 years now, and I'm the president of the bank currently. I
haven't heard of Rio Bank for too many years, but you're saying it's 17 years old?
No, Rio Bank's 40 years old, actually. And actually, when I came here,
that's headline news.
When I came here 17 years ago, I hadn't heard of Rio Bank either, and so. It was a very small community bank that the headquarters were over on 23rd Street, and started in 1985. And so in February we celebrated our 40th year in business. It was originally a nationally chartered bank, and so it was called Rio National Bank. And it went from about 85 to 99, and that's in 99 is when we had management and some ownership changes that took place. And it was really just more of a retail and type business, a lot of car loans and floor plan loans for car lots that are all up and down 23rd Street. And so it hadn't really grown, but got to be about a $30 million bank before guys like Ford Sasser and Danny Vela came on board to really kind of change the scope of how the bank operates and make it more of a commercial bank going forward.
I think that's the first time I heard of it when Ford Sasser came in. There seemed to be a lot more publicity then. Well, they specialized in that coverage.
Right. They had they started putting capital together, and they had a growth plan, and so they got the bank cleaned up and then started growing in communities like San Juan and Palm View as they started branching out.
So have you read back into the history when you say it's 40 years of age? How did it start?
Well, one of the original organizers is Dr. Cayetano Barrera, if you're familiar with him. And he was our chairman of the board for many, many years. He retired here a couple years ago, but his son Marcus continues to serve on the board now. And so when I joined, the other original organizer that was still involved was a gentleman named Dallas Nelson, and who was a local architect and very involved in the community. And he passed away a number of years ago, but that was the original group. But the Barreras are the ones that are still involved, that were original organizers.
But from what you're telling me, this really is rooted in our community here.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, this is a Valley born and bred business, no doubt.
Can you tell us a little bit about the community involvement the bank has, the charities that you help support? How big is that component of your work?
Well, as a community bank, I mean, that's a huge piece of what we are, who we are. And so you can go to any of our local banks and you'll see them involved in every community they operate in, whether it's out in Starr County, whether it's cook-offs or anything else happening in the community, in the schools, they're active and engaged. Same thing, even if we go to Elsa, if we go to Brownsville, Edinburgh, we always try and have a huge presence and meaningful impact in the communities we operate. We moved up into San Antonio here probably in the last 3 years or so, and started out small, but I just saw the other day that our financial literacy programs have taken off and have huge traction in some of the schools up there, to the point where kids are working through local Kiwanis clubs and leveraging our group, and they're teaching, I believe it's the entire junior class at one of the schools, one of the high schools there, on financial literacy, and so they're teaming up with our bankers up there, and that's been a big piece of what we've been doing the last number of years.
So no question, people know of you in the community because of your work in important.
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, that's like I said, that's a big difference between community banks and the big national banks. That's why you'll see any of our local banks down here really engaged in the communities, because I mean that is our base. That's what we're here for.
And across the valley, how many branches do you have?
We have 15 locations down here, and so we have 15 locations down here. We're working on adding some additional locations. Right now, we've acquired some land off the expressway in Edinburgh and are about to start construction on East Edinburgh. And really, there hasn't been a banking presence in East Edinburgh ever. And so we're going to hopefully here in about 12 to 18 months, we'll have a new location between Canton and Freddie, right on the east side of the expressway. So we'll have a very nice presence over there. Edinburgh's been a tremendous market for us. I think if you look at any of the new rooftops, a lot of them are on that east side, and we want to be there to serve those folks as well.
That was actually going to be my next question. Tell us about your expansion plans. What's on the horizon?
Well, they're extensive.
We've got all day. I'm really keen to learn.
Yeah, they're extensive, and so we've always tried to grow just naturally and steadily. Not to get out too far over our skis. Ford early on, I remember him telling me, we don't need to be the biggest bank, we just need to be the last bank in town. And so we've always been very diligent in how we try to grow and where we go. And so we, about 3 or 4 years ago, out of a strategic planning session, we decided we want to try and expand up into the San Antonio corridor. And when I say San Antonio corridor, it's the 281 corridor going north to Austin. Doesn't mean necessarily we want to be in the metro areas of San Antonio and Austin and compete with those banks, but we think the community bank model works really well more on the peripherals of that. And so if we drew up a map, it's really having I-10 on the west and 35 on the east, and it's that fairway that kind of runs around San Antonio to Austin through that area, which really has 281 in the middle. And so we started with the loan production office in San Antonio. We have 2 directors that live in San Antonio. Ford was raised in San Antonio, so we had a lot of familiarity with that territory. So that started off, and then we opened a branch there, and then we moved a loan production office to the north side of town at Stone Oak and 1604. And so that's where we stand today up there. And so we were looking at adding some additional locations to kind of fill in, and we've put some property under contract in towns like Fredericksburg and Kerrville, trying to be out in the peripheral. But ideally, we were trying to get into more of that 281 corridor, and so we've been trying to find a partner to match up with. And so over the last 3+ years, Ford and I probably visited with 12+ banks, and unfortunately, buying a bank isn't like going to Walmart where you can pick the one you want off the shelf. There's a lot that takes place in getting to know the banks, getting comfortable with them, and quite frankly, there's a lot of resistance, from banks to sell, because just like us, they're rooted in their communities. Their ownership, that becomes part of their family, and so there's lots of deep ties in these banks, and so. Finding the right partner and finding someone that's willing and able to sell is not always the easiest thing, but we believe we found really the very best partner we could have to acquire and merge with up there in Lone Star Capital Bank. When I was talking about the fairway, they are in San Antonio, they're in Blanco, they're in Johnson City, they're in Dripping Springs, and they're in Marble Falls. And so that's right where we were looking to go, and getting to spend time with them. Very similar cultures at the banks, and so this won't be like a big bank coming in to communities and saying this is the way it's going to be. We are very meaningful in the way that we've tried to piece this thing together. I've told the teams on both sides, we're not just trying to build the bigger bank, we're trying to build the better bank. And so we spent a lot of times understanding how Lone Star Capital operates and finding the best pieces of that. And if they're better than what we were doing at Rio Bank, that's what we're going to incorporate going forward. So we're in that period right now trying to put this all together. Our hope is to close this thing here in the next month or so, and then obviously those locations would open up as Rio Banks, hopefully in June.
So you're very much well along the line.
Oh, yeah.
It's close to completion.
It is. Our target right now is to close on May 30th. That gives us a month end and a weekend. It's really nice for my CFO to have a month end to be able to merge books. And so that's our target. Between then? It has been, but fortunately, we've made one acquisition in our history. We bought the Elsa State Bank and Trust in 2018, and a lot of the folks that were on board from both Elsa and Rio are still here, and so we have the experience of that merger. The folks on the Lone Star side, they've made 2 acquisitions in their history. They had acquired a bank called the Cattlemen's Bank and another one called the Business Bank of Texas or the Business Bank of Austin. And they've done system conversions, and that's your big core that really backs all of the data inside of a bank. And so we've been able to piece together a conversion team of 20 plus people that we meet on a weekly basis to make sure everyone's on track. And so luckily we had kind of the blueprints for what to do, and we had the people that understood how to accomplish that. And so we've been on track, and quite frankly, it's gone way smoother than any of the other ones that we've done. And I think a lot of that's the experience and the people.
So the south side of San Antonio is growing fast, probably with Toyota being the anchor. That's led to a lot of development down there with some different suppliers. Is that a factor in you deciding, okay, 281 is where we want to be?
We haven't looked at the south side. I know that Lone Star has 1 or 2 lenders that have some focus down there, but there's no physical presence on the south side. Really, the furthest south we'll be right now is Alamo Heights, so just north of downtown. And then the primary location and the headquarters for Lone Star is actually at Stone Oak in 1604, right across the highway from our loan production office.
So you're more thinking of the hill country.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Great. So now back to the Rio Grande Valley. Your thoughts on the growth down here? I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? To just read about it and just keep up with everything in all the communities.
You know, it's funny. I think so many outsiders come down here, and their perception is, from whatever they see on the news or whatnot, is so different from when they actually get down here and see everything. And I think they're always amazed at how much we have going on. And having grown up here, it wasn't always like this. And I think the diversity that we have in our economy right now can't be understated, and how impactful it is. You just have so many different varied bases, whether it's the international trade that everyone's aware of, the retail that we get here. I think we still have the highest sales of any Simon managed property at our mall. But then you get into what's happening with SpaceX, what's happening at the port, and then we look at companies like Zoho coming in here because they realize that we have the technology talent that's coming out of the university. I think the educational opportunities that exist down here have created a lot of that opportunity because you didn't have those options 25 years ago. And Guy Bailey and the entire team at UTRGV, the things that they've done with this university are truly phenomenal. And I think it's really, really helped out this community for the long run. I go off to different banking conferences and functions, and people always say, "What's it like in the Valley?" And I try and describe all these economies, and say, "Oh my gosh, you have so much going on." I said, "I can't think of many places that are better to be over the next 10 to 20 years because of all the growth." And then you look at the demographics. I mean, we have young demographics here and diverse, and they're becoming more educated. And so I think you'll see a lot more industries call the Valley home over the next decade or so.
I'm pleased you brought up Zoho as an example, because that's a story that doesn't get told enough.
Right.
They didn't know where the Rio Grande Valley was.
Sure.
They're an Indian multinational firm, software firm. They get to California, naturally. That's going to be the first stop from the Far East. and then they find out, maybe Texas is a good state, lower taxation, etc. So they get to Austin, and then they want to expand the Austin area, and they start to recruit, and all the applications for jobs, so many of them are coming from the Valley,
right.
And they say, let's go down and check this out.
Yeah.
And this is where the talent is, and it's just their philosophy that they want to be in more provincial areas. They don't want to be in the big cities.
Right.
So it fits their ethos, and so they land down here, and now they've this expansion plans, a tech campus.
Yep.
And if that story could be told to other tech companies around the country, this is where the talent is. It could be they could be the catalyst for this as a real game changer.
And quite frankly, they're not the only folks. I mean, there's some other very, very successful technology-based companies that are started right here in McAllen or in the Valley, and are doing great things all over the world. And so, people focus on the big company now at Zoho, but there's a lot of other ones that are doing great work right now.
So hopefully some of them bank with you.
I hope so.
Thank you for that question about the growth, because you're quite right. I mean, people, you go to those conferences and they ask about the value, and they don't realize what's happening. And that's that stereotypical view that
most parts of the country just aren't like that. I mean, we have a number of pockets in Texas, and so we're extremely fortunate, but a lot of the country just isn't like that right now. So we're very, very fortunate, certainly.
Good. If you would, can you comment on the global economy now? Some of the headlines recently, sort of mixed messages, and we potentially will be impacted here, being a border economy, and how what's happening on the global scene impacts our region.
It's
an open-ended question there.
Sure, and I think a lot of people are really quick to jump to conclusions, and so it's hard to really guess what that's going to look like, because it changes every day. I think today was just another example of it. The jobs report came out, and it doesn't fit the narrative that's been pushed that the economy is cratering. One thing that I've always realized, especially in this business, in working with so many different folks, is, business owners, entrepreneurs, they're going to find ways to make things work. They're going to adjust. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's COVID or if it's tariffs. They're going to find a way to adjust their business. Now, the difficult thing is just the time frame they have to make adjustments. Do I need to raise my prices? Do I need to reduce my expenses? Flipping that switch overnight can be difficult, but you give them time. These folks are successful for a reason. And, some people say, the economy's slowing down, but you go out to eat probably the same places I go out to eat, and they're still packed at night. And so I'm sure there's some businesses that are probably a little slow right now, but for the most part, it's hard to tell that. I mean, we sit here and look across the street at Target and Dick's and Walmart, and there's people there all day long. It hadn't slowed down yet, so maybe we'll see some of it. We have some customers that have manufacturing-related entities, and whether they have suppliers or actual facilities over in the Far East, they're making adjustments. They're making trips over there to prepare for it. Doesn't mean they've flipped the switch right away and said we're backing out, but they're making preparations for alternative ways to get things sourced over here. It may change their businesses, but again, people are resourceful. They're going to figure this out. So we'll see how that goes.
How important is Mexican national deposits, etc., to your bank? I mean, some of our banks it's really a high percentage.
Right. For us, I mean, we have a fair number, but not the amount you would find at some of the other local institutions. We have some great customers that are based down there, but that hadn't been a primary focus at our bank.
And another thing that came up recently, we heard that one of the banks here is decided to pull the plug, pull the lever, and say yes to AI. Artificial intelligence is going to play a big role in the bank. It's going to impact the whole economy, I know, but is it something you've been thinking of?
Well, I think that's a very broad term, and so it just depends, because whether or not a lot of people realize that AI is incorporated into things that we're doing every day. So, I mean, Zoom meetings, we all are on Zoom meetings, but as soon as I finish a Zoom meeting now, we have the best meeting minutes we've ever had because it creates those for you. And so there's little things that we're doing. Vantage Bank down here is a pioneer, is becoming a pioneer in issuing stable coins. They've just announced that recently. Their CEO comes from a strong tech background, and so that's going to be more of their focus and how they try and grow and evolve. For the majority of us, I don't think we ever try and fall behind in technology, for the most part, because of our core providers. We have access to the same technologies as the big banks for the most part. You don't want to just fall behind, because then customers become harder to attain going forward. But I think some people can set a priority to become a technology leader and a pioneer. We haven't been built that way. It doesn't mean we won't ever get there, but that's just our focus has really just been more on relationships and growing commercial loans and commercial deposits.
Well, those are all the questions I had, Brian. Is there anything you feel I've left out? Anything else you're working on that you'd like to tell the viewers about?
No, the banks down here are probably as sound as they've ever been, which doesn't matter if you're going into a recession or expansion. You want to have well-capitalized banks. And about 2.5 years ago, the Treasury Department had a program called Emergency Capital Investment Program. And they set aside a large amount of money to go out to banks that were designated as either minority depository institutions or CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions. And because of the area in which we serve, quite a few of our entities were designated as MDIs or CDFIs. And so I believe the calculation in capital that was injected into banks in the Valley was about $500 million, or over $500 million went into capital for the bank. So that's not something that we can immediately go leverage right away, but it gives all of us the abilities to grow and to develop programs to enhance our communities down here. And so that is not available across the country. There are not a lot of places that have that type of capacity. And so I think having very sound, well-capitalized banks on top of a growing community is one of the things that really will continue to set us apart as we move through the coming years. That the money that we receive is also part of why we're looking to expand through acquisitions and going into different markets. We believe in the Valley, but we also believe as a franchise grows, you have to diversify a little bit to diversify some of that risk. We're in the risk business. And so we see San Antonio and that corridor that we've talked about as being the area that we want to focus on diversifying a little bit. And so that's part of why we're able to make the acquisition. And but we're proud of what we do in the Valley. Part of the funds that we receive, we have to do some tracking on there, and they monitor what they refer to as qualified lending or deep impact lending. And almost 90% of all the loans we make qualify as deep impact lending because we're lending in majority minority communities. We're lending in low income areas, but that's predominantly what we do because we choose to do business in the Valley. And so we're proud of that down here.